So I'm going to create a small presentation in Prezi to show you my techniques and tips for creating professional looking architectural presentations. So I'm going to start with a blank template. So I'm going to say start blank Prezi. Now right away you're going to have a circular frame and some text. I'm just going to delete those. So I'm going to use elegant theme for now. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a couple lines of text. So here I'm going to call this design. Then I'm going to create another one. I'm going to call it renderings. And now these are using the body text style. So if I was to click into it, you could see body, subtitle, and title. So now I'm going to create a title. I'm going to call it BIM After Dark Prezi Tutorial. And I'm going to change that to a title. And now I can crank up the size of the font just by grabbing the edges or using the plus signs. And now I'm going to actually start throwing in some frames. So it's going to be a linear presentation, so it's going to run from left to right and then go down and run from left to right. So the first thing you want to do is you want to figure out what kind of frames you're going to use and if you're going to use frames at all. I suggest using them wherever possible because you can apply different effects such as fading in. But you might not want to see it. So there's two types of frames I suggest using. One is the bracket frame and the other one is the invisible frame. There's a circle and there's a rectangular frame. I prefer using the invisible and the bracket just because of the way they look. So I'm going to draw a couple frames here. If you hold shift, it'll automatically lock to a 4:3 aspect ratio. So I'm going to draw a frame here. It's going to be a bracket frame. Let me move the rendering down. All I'm doing is clicking around now. Now let's put an invisible frame next to it. So just select invisible frame. If you want it to line up, you can move it and you'll see it has those tracking arrows or tracking lines, and you could get it lined up with the other one. And then the last one's not going to have a frame, so you can sort of see what happens there. So I just put some text on, and then I'm going to put some frames on. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some images. So if I go to Insert Image, this little box comes up on the right hand side, and you could select files from your desktop. So what I'm going to grab are files that were pre-made for a presentation of mine. If I go View, Large Icons, you can see. And these are actually a bunch of images that have already been photoshopped and they're ready for a presentation. With Prezi you really want to plan ahead and think about your presentation from start to finish, and that'll help you create your images as well as lay out your Prezi. So the first image I'm going to bring in is going to be a little concept image and maybe an overall. And then I'm going to click Open. Now whenever you bring an image into Prezi, it's going to ask if you want to resize. I highly suggest resizing it and not keeping the original. You won't lose much quality unless it's a super small image or something like that, but if it's a reasonably sized image, if you resize, it's only going to make the presentation and the performance of Prezi better. So I really suggest resizing. So I'm going to click Resize and Resize. And if I zoom in, our images are placed into this frame. I actually want them in the other one, so I'm going to select them both and just drag them over. And now you can see we've got two images inside of a frame. Now in this frame, which is the invisible frame, I'm going to show you how to do a fade-in effect. So with a fade-in effect, you really want to pay attention to the image size and the order of the images. So if I go to Select Files, I'm going to use an example that I know will work. So I'm going to use an example that I know will work, and that's going to be an aerial scene which has a fade in with some text. So again, I'm going to resize and resize. And what you want to do is you don't want to mess with the size of these images yet. You want them to be the same size, so you want to scale them at the same time. But what you do want to pay attention to is the order of the images. So if you'll notice, the image on top here that I have selected is underneath the image with the labels on it, which is correct, because what's going to happen is it's going to fade in above it. So you want to make sure that if you have multiple images in a row, that one's on top of the other, and then you can set the fade in effect. So now that they're both on the right order, what I'm going to do is I'm going to align them. So if I pull up the top one, it'll actually lock in place. And then I'm going to hold Shift and drag across. and then I'm going to hold Shift again and change the scale of it so that everything is at the same size. So now both images, if I was to pull this image down, you could see the other image scaled with it. Now all I want to do is make sure that I lock them in place, and we're good to go. So now the last image I'm going to do is I'm going to just place an image without a frame because I don't need any information on it, I just want to see it. So I'm going to insert an image, resize it, and now I'm going to place the image right in line here. Try and scale it to something similar. And now if I zoom out, I have a quick presentation. The one thing I want to do is I want to create an invisible frame that wraps the entire presentation. And the reason I'm going to do that is that'll be my home view, or the first stop in my path. So now I've got a frame, a large frame here, a couple frames inside, and I'm going to show you to create the presentation. It's a matter of literally clicking in the order you want to present. So if you click the pencil on the left hand side here, so it says Edit Path and Animation, what you're going to do is you're going to click the frames or the images or even the text in the order that you want to see them zoom to, and then Prezi will do the rest for you. So if I click the overall large view, which is my large frame, you'll see it creates a 1. And now let's say I want to go down to this frame, and this is the reason you create a frame, is if you want to zoom into an area that doesn't have any content, that's how you would zoom into it. So I select that frame. Now let's go even deeper. Maybe I want to select these images and zoom into them. So I'm going to zoom into that image, maybe zoom into the next image, and then maybe I'll zoom out to the frame again. And you see I'm just clicking in order just by the way the presentation is going to go. Now I want to make sure I select the next frame, which is our invisible frame, and we're going to have a fade-in effect there. So once we select the frame, you can see there's a little star that pops up, and it's called Animate Frame Content. So simply click Animate Frame Content, and it's going to ask you which one do you want to fade in. So I select it, and you can see if I press Preview, there's my original image and there's my second image. They're actually not lined up, so let me fix that afterwards. But now you click Done, and there's a fade-in effect there. The last thing I want to do is select our final image as our seventh frame, and then we're going to finish on the overall home screen. So you see we've got 8 zooms, 8 transitions, and they're automatically created for us. Now before I do the presentation, I want to zoom in and make sure I fix this image here. So I missed the lock, but it's actually locking down a little bit. So now we can actually test that too, that transition. If I hit the star again and I just press Preview, you can see it fades right on top. Perfect. So now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the presentation and show you what we created. So to run through my presentation, it's as simple as clicking the blue Present button on the top left. So I'm going to click Start Presenting, and it's going to zoom out to the home screen. So if I hit the right arrow key, it's going to go to our first frame. Now if I hit the right arrow key again, it's going to zoom into my frame. And then, again, this is the path that we set up. Then I'm going to zoom in a little more and look at this slide. Zoom to the right and look at another slide. Now if you remember, we zoomed out to the bracket. And then I'm going to slide over to this new one. Now remember, this is where the fade-in effect is. So we went to this position in the path, and now if I hit the right arrow key again, you're going to see it fade right in. So that's an awesome effect, and it definitely will help you out and add a lot of interest to your presentation. Now if you move on, hit the right arrow key again. Here's our elevation sheet. Hit the right arrow key again, and we zoom all the way out to the beginning. And so that's a really quick, brief introduction to Prezi. And just with those tools alone, you can make awesome presentations. Now that we've laid out our presentation, we can customize how it looks. To do that, Prezi has a pull down called Themes. If you pull it down, there's lots of different preset themes we can use. So let's click a couple of these and see how they look. One's called Sketchy. So now you can see we have this sort of sketchy font and these different colors. And notice how the brackets change colors. And we can scroll through these and use ones that maybe we like. But now if you don't like the ones that they have here, you can actually customize them on your own. So clicking Themes and going down to Customize Current Theme, we're able to flip through a wizard and change different things. As you can see, I'm pulling through. So you can change the background color. You can upload a 3D background, which is in a beta form. You can change the font colors and the font types, Right now you're limited to these font types unless you know a little bit of coding. So if you move on to advanced and you know a little bit more about what you want, and you even have your RGB codes, you can actually type in different RGB codes for the titles, the bodies, the backgrounds. You can see it's very customizable. And even beyond that, what they've added is a CSS editor. So if I click here, use the CSS editor, a screen pops up on the right here, and you can see you have a CSS style, and you could actually customize it. If you're good at CSS and coding and creating sort of website themes, this is actually how you would do it. And now you can actually add custom themes based on, or custom fonts, custom themes, custom colors based on a CSS basis. So once you've selected your theme, let's close out of the CSS editor, go to themes. I'm going to say I want manifesto theme for some reason. Ooh, that's a little yellow. Let's change that to, let's go back to that sketchy one. And now let's customize it. So I'm going to go to customize current theme. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the wizard. I'm going to change the background to a little bit lighter gray. Maybe I'll change the color of a font, just change it up a little bit to something, let's go with orange, and click done. So now we have a custom theme. Now if you want to save that theme for later use, you click under themes, go to save current theme, and it'll say my theme number 2, and there it is. Here's our themes here. You could delete them, you could change them, and you could add to them.